In this edition of Careers That Matter, I'm joined by David Williams, the Vice President of Policy at the Business Council of British Columbia. David, what is the Vice President of Policy? What is your job?
I do lots of things. So I do a lot of, I'm an economist by background, so I do a lot of economic analysis. I do a lot of presentations. I publish research articles of differing lengths, some short, some long, in different formats. And I write opinion editorials. I meet with our members and hear their concerns. I meet with government ministers, opposition, people in the legislature, and it's a bit of a jack of all trades type of role.
So are you doing all these things every day, or do you sort of segment out your weeks to kind of cover off different aspects of your role?
It's variable. It depends on what the issues of the day are, or what themes that I'm talking about. I mean, I'm as you know, I talk a lot about GDP per person and real income per person, and the importance of productivity in driving living standards. So I've been a bit of a broken record on those things since I joined the Business Council in 2018.
Do you have your face buried in screens and books as you're gathering all these bits and pieces of information, and then do you get some downtime to digest it so that you can put together a report?
It's a lot of fun. I mean, I read all the time. I would be doing it anyway, I guess. This is what I love to do. So I read academic journals. I read newspapers from all over the world. I read what other business groups are saying, what other researchers are saying in academia, and I look at a lot of data, a lot of spreadsheets, StatsCan data, OECD data, and do a lot of my own analysis to see what makes the economy tick.
How much of your time on a weekly basis are you devoting to that? Because clearly you also devote time to doing interviews like this, or the one that we recorded for Conversations That Matter, or I've heard you on the radio and being interviewed by television stations and so on. So what's sort of the breakdown of the allocation of time, let's say, in a week?
It's hard to say. No week looks the same in my job. It's very dynamic. Probably a third on analysis type work, a third on meetings and meeting with members and talking with people in the legislature, and then 1/3 on other on other things such as media when there are things that are going on.
Do you have a small team as well, or is it just you?
I have my colleagues Ken Peacock and Denise Mullen, and for many years we had Jock Finlayson, who was very well known in the BC economics community, and together we put out a lot of think pieces, economic analysis, analysis of regulatory impacts. We respond to the government. I should have mentioned we respond to the government when they have a policy proposal. We'll write a submission on that and file that with the government and make that known. What are the business groups? What is the concern of the business community?
So what's the objective in compiling this and putting out these reports? What is it that you're hoping to achieve? Are you hoping to just give people information that can inform them when they're making decisions, or are you also hoping to influence policy?
We're hoping to influence policy, first and foremost. And the reason we're trying to do that is we're trying to have a more prosperous province and a more prosperous country. So for me, we want to see real incomes going up. They're going down or sideways, and they've been doing that for a number of years. And that's, to me, untenable in the long term. So my North Star really is to try and advocate for policies that are going to improve people's well-being through having better incomes and better opportunities.
So let's sort of go back to the beginning of your career. You graduate from sort of the school level that virtually everybody goes through. And I know you're from Australia, so I don't even know whether or not you call that secondary before you go on to post-secondary education here. When you were leaving that one level of education to then pursue what your career would be, did you have any idea that this was the path that you were going to be on?
No.
Really?
Not at all. I did my undergraduate degree in Brisbane, Australia, and I started working when I was at the end of my second year. I did an internship in the summer with the Queensland Department of Transport in the Maritime Division. So I was working on shipping policy and how much do we pay pilots to go out to marine vessels to bring them into port. Should it be done by helicopter or by vessel? Capital budgeting plans. I was working on those sorts of things, and then just as a junior analyst, junior economist, I did that ended up being asked to come back to do that for a couple of years. So I actually did that through the third and fourth year of my degree. I finished a 3-year undergraduate degree, was invited to stay on to do honours, and I did that. And
what was the undergraduate degree in?
Bachelor of Economics.
Okay, so you were on an economics path.
Yeah,
okay.
I always loved economics.
Yeah.
Because it's a social science to me, and it cuts across philosophy, history, mathematics, economics, statistics, I should say.
It's how the world works.
It's a frame of thinking about how the world works.
Yeah.
And then I got offered a job when I finished my honours degree, which is the 4th year. I got offered a job as a graduate at the Reserve Bank of Australia. So I ended up working in Sydney, Australia, moved there for a couple of years, and then got offered a job working in the Prime Minister's Department in Canberra. So I moved to the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and I arrived during the tax reform era. So Australia went through this period of about 20 years where there were a lot of economic reforms, a lot of structural reforms, competition reforms, tax reforms, product market reforms, you name it. It was an extraordinary period. And I arrived just as they were doing the tax reform era, including the introduction of a goods and services tax in 2000. So I arrived just before that, when it was passing through the House and the Senate. And the week I started, it was rejected in the Senate by one senator, who then there was a mad scramble as to how the GST could be changed to make it more palatable, and they ended up taking the GST off food. And that was how it was able to be passed. That was in 2000, and I also worked on the business tax reforms that were happening concurrently with that. So that was very, very exciting. I was later became the senior economic advisor there, producing the economic forecasts each quarter alongside the Treasury and the Reserve Bank of Australia to understand how the economy ticks. So John Howard was the Prime Minister at that time. So I used to provide a lot of written briefings. I used to brief his staff, his political staff, I should say, on the state of the economy, what were the issues, and so forth. And I just decided at the ripe old age of 26 that being a senior economic policy advisor was a little young, and I felt like I needed to do some more study. So I decided at the age of 28, after I applied, to go overseas and do some postgrad.
Where'd you go?
Went to Oxford University. So I did a Master of Philosophy in Economics. I spent the first year absolutely sure that I'd been let in on some sort of computer error, but I got through. And
why would you say something like that?
Well, it was hard. It was really hard, and I felt a bit older than some of the other students that went through. And I was fortunate enough to get a good result at the end of the first year. It was tough. They failed 20% of the course for at least one subject, and 10% not invited to come back.
Wow.
But anyway, I did well, and was invited to stay on for the DPhil, they call, which is a PhD in Oxford.
And so that's where you got your doctorate?
That's right.
Wow. So you leave Oxford. Was the heartstrings pulling you back to Australia, or did you go somewhere else that led you to come to Canada?
I worked at the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. So I worked there for a while. I actually was there in 2008 in the lead up to the Obama-McCain election.
Wow.
So George W. Bush was still the president, and the International Monetary Fund is a couple of blocks from the White House, and so it was all happening around me. It was a really exciting time, and I really thought hard about staying in Washington.
Well, the world was about to melt down too.
That's right.
Yeah.
In fact, it did just after I left. Ironically as it is, I worked in I think it was called the Banking Stability Department or the Macro Stability Department, and it was very quiet over the summer. Mm-hmm. And I left in September of 2008, and then I think 2 weeks later, Lehman Brothers fell apart, and everything happened. But when I was there, it was very quiet.
Where'd you go after that?
I went back to finish the doctorate, and then was weighing up my options as to where to go. But I had met someone, and she has family has family here. And
So you fell in love.
that's right.
Yeah.
So she's from South Africa actually, but her
Yeah.
family had immigrated here many years ago. So she was wanting to move out here. So we ended up here. And then that in itself is a story. I was at a conference in Frankfurt at the European Central Bank in 2010. And my doctoral supervisor, John Muehlbauer, introduced me to John Murray, who was the Deputy Governor of the Bank of Canada. And we got into a conversation about my research, which was on house prices in the Australian context. And he said, we've got a bit of a wee thing going on with house prices in Canada. This was 2010.
Yeah.
And he said, perhaps you'd be interested in coming out and presenting to us. So I did. I went out to Ottawa as a invited scholar and gave some presentations and so forth. And then eventually they said, would you like to apply to come and work at the Bank of Canada? And that lined up with what was happening in my personal life. So I ended up accepting and became a senior economist at the Bank of Canada for 6 years.
In Ottawa?
No, in Vancouver.
In Vancouver?
As it turned out, yeah. So I was based in the regional office here.
And so then what led you to the Business Council?
I was looking for some different challenges there. I mean, all the actions in Ottawa, and there was a lot of travel in the job. So I was very excited to come to the Business Council of BC and focus more on provincial issues and national issues, but from the BC's perspective. It was just great making my work where I was living rather than being 4,500 kilometres away.
Wow. So when you look at your career, I mean, it's an interesting path. What do you think was sort of the leading personal characteristic that you had that put you in a place where you were at these different intersections that you would make decisions and it would take you in another course? Like, what is it that you look at yourself and say, this is what is fundamental to how my career has been able to grow and took me in these different directions?
I think I'm pretty open to new opportunities, and I like to work in dynamic environments. So if in the case of BC, it's often in the news. It's dealing with very current issues, very important issues for British Columbians. That was really attractive to me to come to BC. I liked working for the Prime Minister's Department in Australia, obviously, briefing the PM on what might come up in question time each day. You had to have a good breadth of understanding of all the issues that were current. And that kind of environment's really exciting to me. So I guess, openness and liking a fast-paced, dynamic environment would be two things I'd actually identify.
Well, I think that's an important insight, especially for any young person who might be watching this. They might be going, well, how do I become like you? And I think that you're right. That openness to opportunity and to continual learning makes a big difference.
You don't know where your career is going to take you. That's the bottom line. You can't map that out. But a saying I'm fond of is in life you need to be lucky and good. And sometimes you can be really good and really unlucky, and sometimes you can be not good enough but lucky.
Yeah.
And then other times it all comes together, and you're good enough at that time, and some luck comes your way, and it all works out. And so that's kind of like how I try to stay optimistic and positive about these things.
Well, I'm going to say that we're lucky that you are here in British Columbia doing the work that you're doing, because I think you do just a fantastic job, and hopefully you motivate others, especially young people who are starting their careers, to say, wow, I can make a difference in my chosen field, whether or not they choose economics or not. It's about knowing that you can make a difference and a positive contribution.
Absolutely. I might just throw a plug there for the Association of Professional Economists of British Columbia. I've been the president of that for the last 3 years, and we've got about 100 of BC's top economists as members of that. So if you are a young economist watching this show, I'd really encourage you to join and to participate in BC's vibrant economics community.
Fabulous. Thank you.